Welcome to Horror Babble. Werewolves and Dogmen continues today with an original work by yours truly, the Dogman of Fangdale Beck. Stranded in a snowstorm on the North York moors, a couple begins to suspect they're not alone. And without further ado, The Dogman of Fangdale Beck by Ian Gordon. 1. I first sent this account to Fortean Weekly a few months after it happened. They offered to send one of their field people up to talk to me in person, but I turned them down. Putting pen to paper was hard enough. Talking about it, trying to answer questions I don't have answers for, no thanks. I know what I saw that night. I know what Mary and I went through. For the record, I'm not some kind of nutter, or at least I wasn't before that night. I don't keep books on UFOs or haunted houses. I don't have a cabinet full of crystals or an attic stuffed with conspiracy magazines. I work for a shipping firm in Hartlepool. It's a stable job that supports a normal life. Before this happened, my biggest problem was my back. Slipped a disc a few years ago shifting boxes. Ever since, I've had to be careful. Avoid heavy lifting, that sort of thing. The doctor says I'll have to live with it. Though on a good day, I hardly notice it. On a bad day, well, you learn to grit your teeth and take the pain. It was Mary who suggested the drive that afternoon. She said the heated seats in her car might help my back, loosen me up a bit. She's like that, always looking for little ways to help. It was her pride and joy, that car. A big dark blue Rover she'd bought second-hand from her uncle. The seats warmed up like an electric blanket. We didn't really have a destination in mind. It was one of those lazy February afternoons where you want to clear your head and see a bit of the countryside. The radio was on low, the windows misted slightly, and for a while the two of us just drove in comfortable silence. Neither of us planned on ending up on the moors. We'd gone north out of Elmsley without really thinking, and soon enough the roads got narrower and lonelier. There were long stretches where we didn't pass another car for 5, 10 minutes at a time. The sky started to close in. I remember saying something about how bleak it looked, and Mary just smiled, said it had a kind of beauty to it. I wasn't so sure. We weren't far from Fangdale Beck, though I didn't realise it at the time. It's the tiniest of villages. Blink and you'll miss it. But the name sticks with you afterwards. Fangdale. Sounds like something out of a ghost story, doesn't it? Fangs in the dale. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if we crossed some invisible line that afternoon. If there are places out there, even now, where old things still walk, waiting for someone to come close enough. Places where you stumble across something you were never meant to see. The roads narrowed further as we drove, the high hedgerows falling away to wide, empty fields and stretches of open moorland. We passed the odd dry stone wall, sheep standing like statues against the grey light, but no cars, no houses, nothing. Only the occasional weathered signpost to remind us we were still on a road at all. The weather had been hanging over us all afternoon, but as the day darkened, it began to shift. The grey clouds thickened, sinking lower, like a heavy blanket being pulled down across the land. The light took on that strange flat quality you get before snow, the kind that makes everything feel distant and unreal. Mary reached over and switched on the headlights, though it was barely 4 in the afternoon. Bit grim out here, isn't it? I said, mostly to break the silence. I like it, she answered, eyes on the road ahead. It's peaceful. Feels like we've got the whole place to ourselves. That was the problem. The first flakes started falling not long after that. Tiny, scattered at first, then more insistent. The sort of dry, powdery snow that seems harmless but piles up quicker than you realise. The wind began to pick up too, sending swirling little eddies of snow across the tarmac in ghostly patterns. It was strangely hypnotic, watching the white ribbons snake across the black road ahead, as if the moor itself was breathing under the snow. Mary slowed the car, her hands tightening on the wheel. The road was getting slick, and we both knew it. The Rover was sturdy, but it wasn't built for this sort of thing. "You sure we're not getting a bit far out?" I asked after a while. "We're fine," she said, but her voice had that deliberate calm people use when they're trying not to sound worried. "We'll head back soon." But of course, soon never comes quite soon enough, does it? A low bank of fog started to rise as we crested a long, shallow hill. It wasn't thick, not at first, just thin fingers curling across the fields, but it made the world seem smaller somehow, as though we'd driven into a pocket of the moors that didn't entirely belong to the same place we'd started from. Even the sheep had disappeared. The snow thickened, falling heavier now, big wet flakes slapping against the windscreen. The wipers made a steady, rhythmic squeak that only seemed to emphasize the silence outside. Every so often, Mary would glance at the dashboard clock, though neither of us said anything about it. And that's when it happened. There was a dull thud, like a muted pop, and the car gave a little lurch to one side. "Bugger," Mary muttered, guiding us carefully onto a narrow lay-by that opened up alongside the road. We came to a slow, steady stop. I felt it before I saw it, the unmistakable lean of the car sitting unevenly. "Puncture?" "Puncture," she confirmed, killing the engine. We sat for a few seconds, the heater fan blowing warm air, the world outside continuing to disappear under the falling snow. The lay-by wasn't much, just a flat patch of gravel at the roadside, bordered by a skeletal line of wind-stunted trees and a ragged fence marking the start of the moor proper. "Well," I said, "I suppose that's our cue to head home." "If only." She offered a thin smile, already pulling out a mobile. "Signal's patchy, but I think I can get through." It took a few attempts, but she managed to get hold of the AA. The man on the other end told us what we already suspected. The weather was slowing everything down. Closest unit was coming from Thirsk. Might be a couple of hours, maybe longer. We hung up and sat there, watching the snow continue to build. The heater hummed. The wind nudged at the car now and then, making the trees creak softly. For a while, neither of us spoke. I stared out through the blurry glass as the fog thickened into soft white walls around us. The world felt far away, distant, as if we'd slipped just slightly out of step with reality. I remember thinking even then that there was something unnatural about how quiet it was. And then, of course, things got worse. 2. The snow must have been falling for nearly an hour when we heard it. To begin with, it was only a faint rumble in the distance, carried strangely on the wind. We both looked up as headlights emerged from the fog behind us, two pale orbs cutting through the swirling snow. "Was someone else daft enough to be out here?" Mary said. The car came slowly, its tires crunching softly on the snow-dusted tarmac. As it drew closer, I noticed how cautiously it was moving, like the driver wasn't entirely sure of the road ahead. Then, without warning, it drifted gently to the side and rolled into the lay-by behind us. There was a dull, cushioned bump as it came to rest a few yards back. Mary and I exchanged glances. "That's weird," I said. "Maybe they've broken down too," she offered. We both sat there for a moment, waiting for someone to get out, but no one did. The headlights remained on, glowing faintly through the thickening mist, but there was no movement. The car just sat there. The snow continued to fall, beginning to blanket both vehicles. The only sound was the quiet whisper of flakes tapping against the windscreen. "Should we check on them?" I asked finally. Mary nodded, though I could see she was uneasy. We bundled up, throwing on our coats and hats, and stepped out into the cold. The silence was immediate and total, as though the very air had been muffled. The snow underfoot made a faint crunching sound with every step. My breath fogged in front of me. We approached the car warily. It was an older model, a dark Vauxhall by the look of it. The driver's door was shut. The windows were partially fogged, but even through the glass I could tell the car was empty. I tried the door. It opened easily, and just as I'd suspected, empty. The interior light flickered on as the door swung wider, revealing an undisturbed seat, the faint lingering smell of damp wool, but nothing else. Mary's voice was a whisper behind me. Where did they go? I looked around instinctively, scanning the lay-by and the edge of the moor beyond. That's when I noticed the footprints, or rather, what should have been footprints. There was a trail in the snow, leading away from the car and disappearing into the fog, but they weren't shaped like any boot or shoe. They were long, narrow, and uneven, like the pads of an animal. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "Jack," Mary said quietly, "let's get back to the car." I didn't argue. As we turned, somewhere out there, deep in the night, something let out a single sharp cry, half a bark, half a scream. We shut ourselves back inside the Rover and locked the doors without speaking. The heater hummed gently, blowing warm air that failed to chase away the chill that had settled in my bones. Outside, the snow continued to fall in thick, silent sheets, swirling in the headlights like ash from some distant fire. Neither of us mentioned the prints. Neither of us mentioned the cry we'd heard. But I could see it in Mary's eyes, the same creeping unease gnawing at the edge of my thoughts. We weren't alone. Someone, or something, was out there in the darkness. Minutes dragged by. The clock on the dashboard ticked over with slow, mechanical certainty, but the world outside seemed timeless, frozen in that dim half-light. Every so often, a gust of wind would rattle the bare branches of the trees behind us, making them creak like old bones. The fog had turned the moor into a shapeless white void beyond the reach of the headlights. For all intents and purposes, we could have been the last people left on Earth. The sound came maybe 20 minutes later. A short, sharp bark, too loud and too close. We both jumped. "What was that?" Mary whispered. "Dog, maybe?" I offered, though my tone was unconvincing even to my own ears. There was something off about that bark. It was too deliberate, like someone imitating a dog. Just a single, sharp burst that seemed to hang in the air long after it stopped. We listened, holding our breath. Another bark came a few minutes later, then another, each one slightly closer than the last, echoing strangely through the fog. I leaned forwards and peered out through the fogged windscreen. At first I saw nothing but the swirling snow. But then, just for a moment, a shape moved at the very edge of the light. Something lofty, upright, much too tall for a dog. Mary saw it too. Her hand clutched my arm tightly. "There's something out there," she whispered. The figure shifted again, stepping partially into the beams of the headlights before retreating back into the mist. I caught a brief glimpse of a long, hunched frame, a narrow head, and impossibly what looked like a grin. Teeth bared wide and unnatural, gleaming faintly in the light. Whatever it was smiling. The barking stopped. The silence that followed was worse somehow. "Should we try calling someone again?" Mary asked. I nodded, but when she picked up a mobile, the signal had vanished entirely. The thing was dead, just an empty, black screen. We waited 10 minutes, 20. The shape didn't return. I started to wonder if it had moved on or if we'd simply imagined it. And then came the knock. A single soft tap on the rear window. Mary gasped and spun around. I turned as well, my heart pounding in my chest. But when I looked, there was nothing there. I rolled down the window a fraction and called out into the void. Hello? Is someone there? No answer. I shut the window quickly, locking it again. There were no further knocks, but the sense of being watched remained, heavy and oppressive, like unseen eyes pressed against the thin shell of the car. The snow continued to fall, piling on the bonnet, transforming the world without into something pale and unreal. Mary whispered, "How much longer?" I glanced at the dashboard clock again. The AA might be another hour or so, assuming the roads were still open. But even as I said it, I knew better. The roads were likely buried by now. And then the barking started again, much closer this time. The sounds were low and drawn out, like laughter. I squeezed Mary's hand and tried to remain calm. "Don't worry," I said. "We'll be fine in here." But even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure if I believed them. 3. Time lost meaning after that. The fog pressed in so close it was like being trapped inside a snow globe, cut off from everything beyond the dull glow of the headlights. The barking came and went, never following any pattern, sometimes distant, sometimes near, as though the thing was circling us, testing us. The worst part was not knowing where it would appear next. Mary was holding up better than I expected, but after nearly 2 hours sitting in that sealed box, her nerves were fraying. She shifted uncomfortably, glancing repeatedly at the passenger side window, at the snow swirling against the glass. Finally, she turned to me, her voice tight with embarrassment. "I need the loo." I stared at her, hoping I'd misheard. "Now? I can't wait much longer," she said, forcing a nervous smile. "I'll stay close to the car, I promise." "Mary, it's not safe." "What do you want me to do?" she snapped. "Go here in the car?" For a moment, I considered arguing with her, but I could see from her expression that it wouldn't do any good. She was trying to stay calm, trying not to panic, and I wasn't about to push her over the edge. "All right," I said finally, "but I'm coming with you." The world outside was a formless grey soup. I stood close as Mary stepped around the side of the car and ducked behind the door for what privacy she could manage. I kept scanning the white void, listening, straining to catch any hint of movement. And that's when I heard it again. The barking, closer than before, but not just barking, something else under it, something like words, garbled, wet, throat-clogged attempts at speech, as though the thing was trying to talk but didn't have the right mouth for it. A shape moved in the fog, maybe 20 feet away, something tall and upright, loping forwards with that sick, jerking gait. "Mary!" I hissed. She'd barely straightened up when it lunged out of the whiteness. There was a flash of black fur and shiny teeth, a sound like wet cloth tearing. Mary screamed, stumbling backwards. I barely had time to react. I grabbed the heavy torch from my coat pocket and swung wildly, catching the thing across its face with a sickening crunch. It reeled back, howling, then vanished into the fog as quickly as it had come. Mary was sobbing, clutching at her arm. Blood ran between her fingers. "Back in the car!" I shouted, practically throwing her inside. We slammed the doors shut and locked them. The snow swallowed the world again, but I knew it was still out there, waiting. The car was silent except for Mary's breathing and the low whine of the heater struggling against the cold. The blood on her arm had started to clot, but the torn skin beneath was already darkening, angry and swollen. I dug around in the glove compartment where I'd found the torch, grabbed some old tissues and did what I could to stop the bleeding, but I knew she needed proper treatment, a tetanus shot at the very least. And all the while the snow continued to fall, thick and steady. Our world had shrunk to the small bubble of warmth inside the car. Beyond the windows was nothing but white mist and the pale orange glow of our headlights reflecting off the flakes. Every few minutes I glanced nervously at the windows, expecting to see that grinning face again. But it didn't come. Another hour must have passed before we saw him. The figure emerged slowly from the fog, stumbling into the headlights like a man walking in a daze. He wore a long, tattered coat, the fabric stiff with frost and stained dark. With what, I couldn't tell. His head hung low, arms dangling at his sides, as though he barely had the strength to lift them. For a moment, I felt a flicker of relief. A person, a real person. And then I saw his face. Even through the misted glass, I could see how pale his skin was. Blood was smeared across his chin, and his eyes, wide and round, gleamed oddly in the headlights. His mouth hung slightly open, teeth visible, lips dry and cracked. He staggered closer, one hand reaching out to the driver's side window. His movements were jerky, unnatural, like a puppet fighting its strings. "Help!" he rasped. The voice was wet and abnormally guttural. I didn't answer. I couldn't. "Help, please!" Mary grabbed my arm, whispering, "Jack." He was close now. His hand pressed flat against the window, leaving a streak of something dark. His fingers were unusually long, the nails thickened, almost claw-like. I shook my head. "Stay put," I whispered to her. The man swayed on his feet, then sank to his knees, his head tilting to one side, as if his neck was incapable of supporting it. "Cold," he murmured. "So cold." Despite every instinct in me screaming to stay inside, some irrational part of me, that old stupid British civility, kicked in. I'll call for help," I said, my voice shaking. "Just stay there." But there was no signal, and I knew it. The man or the thing seemed to sense my hesitation. Slowly he raised his head fully, and for a moment I saw it. The faint shimmer of black fur beneath the torn skin of his throat, as though something was shifting just beneath the surface. Then came the smile, that wide, toothy grin, the same I'd seen in the fog earlier, stretched far too wide for any normal face. Mary gasped. I felt her grip tighten on my sleeve, and then the man started to change. It began with a slow shudder that ran through his entire body. The coat slipped from his shoulders, revealing thin, elongated limbs that seemed to ripple and distort. His spine curved sharply, bones popping audibly beneath the skin. The pale human face began to stretch, eyes shrinking into dark, reflective beads. Coarse, oily black fur pushed through the skin in patches. The thing let out a low, rasping growl, part dog, part man, part something else entirely. I didn't wait for it to finish. I grabbed the heavy torch again and burst out of the car, slamming the door behind me. The cold hit me like a wall, but I braced myself against it. I could hear Mary screaming behind the glass as I faced the thing. It rose to its full height, taller than any man, swaying slightly on its hind legs, claws flexing. "Come on, then!" I shouted, voice cracking. "Come on!" The creature let out a nauseating bark and lunged. 4. The beast came at me fast, far faster than anything that size should have been able to move. I barely managed to twist aside as it sprang, its claws raking through the air where my head had been. The torch felt pitiful in my hands, a scrap of metal against something that barely seemed to belong to the same world as me. I swung wildly, catching it across the shoulder with a dull crunch. It staggered but didn't fall, letting out a sound that made my stomach twist, something between a growl and a gurgling laugh. The headlights caught its face as it turned towards me again. The fur glistened wetly in the snow, its long jaws open, tongue lolling. Those eyes, small, dark, almost childlike, fixed on mine, and for a moment there was something nearly human flickering behind them, a kind of recognition or amusement. Then it leapt again. I took off at a run. The snow was deeper off the roadside, pulling at my legs, making every step a battle. The cold burned in my lungs, but I forced myself forwards, stumbling into the whiteness ahead. Behind me, I heard the thing giving chase, a wet, rhythmic thump as it darted after me, its breath coming in sharp, huffing bursts. The fog swallowed everything. My world was merely a few feet of swirling snow and black branches looming like skeletal fingers. The trees were denser here, stunted by wind and rime. The ground dipped and rose unpredictably beneath me. Once or twice I slipped, only barely managing to keep my footing. I didn't dare look back. Branches whipped at my face, scratching my skin raw. Somewhere to my left, the thing barked again, short, sharp, like laughter chasing me through the trees. It was toying with me. I realized too late that I was being herded. The ground began to slope more steeply. The trees thinned, and the wind howled louder. Suddenly, the ground under my feet dropped away entirely, and I skidded down a slick embankment, tumbling and flailing. The torch flew from my hand as I crashed to a stop against a low outcrop of rock. I lay there for a moment, dazed, chest heaving, the cold gnawing at my skin. When I finally forced myself upright, I saw where I'd landed. The ground ended abruptly just a few feet ahead, a sheer drop into nothingness. Beyond lay only clouds of mist and blackness. Somewhere far below, I could hear the faint rush of water, a stream or river winding through the hollow. The cliff face was jagged and sheer, glassy with ice. I was trapped. The sound of crunching snow reached my ears, slow, deliberate steps. The creature emerged from the trees, tall and hunched, its head low, tongue flicking out as it panted. Once again it wore that appalling grin. It stopped a few yards away, swaying slightly as though savouring my fear. I looked around desperately, searching for any kind of weapon, but there was nothing. Just rocks, slippery with ice, useless in my bare hands. The thing tilted its head, studying me, and then, God help me, it spoke. Jack. My name, croaked out of its warped throat, half choked by its canine jaw, but unmistakable. Jack, it said again, voice gurgling. I stumbled back, my feet inching dangerously close to the edge. What do you want? I managed. Its mouth opened wider, impossibly wide, revealing rows of teeth that gleamed in the low light. Cold, it rasped. Hungry. The eyes fixed on mine again, round, dark, and, for an instant, terribly sad. Don't, I whispered. Please. It took another step towards me. I snatched up a loose rock, more instinct than strategy, and hurled it as hard as I could. The stone struck the creature's muzzle with a sharp crack. It howled, staggering sideways. The sound it made was awful, a voice that didn't belong to any world I knew. Before it could recover, I charged. I don't know what I thought I could do. Maybe I didn't think at all, but the impact caught it off guard, driving us both towards the edge. Its claws scraped against the icy rock, trying to hold its footing as we struggled. My hands found its fur, coarse, oily, warm, and I shoved with everything I had left. For a second, we teetered there on the brink. Its face was inches from mine, those black, liquid eyes filled with something almost pleading, like a dog waiting for its master's command. Its mouth worked open and shut, little broken whines escaping its throat. Help! It croaked again, barely audible, and then it lost its grip. It fell. The creature's long arms flailed as it plummeted into the mist below. I heard it land somewhere far beneath, followed by a terrible silence that seemed to suck the very air out of the world. For the longest time I stood at the cliff's edge, chest heaving, the snow swirling around me. The thing was gone. I told myself that over and over again. It's gone, it's gone. But some not so small part of me wasn't convinced. Finally, my back got the better of me. I sank to my knees, trembling, the cold eating me alive. I don't know how long I sat there before I found the strength to stagger back towards the car. 5. The trek to the Rover was longer than it should have been. Or maybe it just felt that way. The fog closed in around me again, swallowing the trees and the faint trail I'd left behind. My breath came in short bursts, every exhale puffing out in front of my face before vanishing into the cold. The silence out there was heavier than before, like the moor itself had gone back to sleep, waiting for whoever was foolish enough to disturb it next. A few times I thought I heard movement behind me, light crunches in the snow, the snapping of twigs, but when I stopped and turned, there was nothing to see, only the endless white. When I finally reached the lay-by, the car was still there, half buried under a fresh layer of snow. The headlights burned dimly through the fog, casting dull halos into the whiteness. For one awful second, my stomach lurched. I couldn't see Mary inside. I ran the last few steps, slipped on the snow, and slammed my hands against the driver's side window. She was there, slumped against the passenger door, eyes closed, her breath fogging the glass faintly. Unconscious, but alive. I fumbled with the door, half-frozen fingers struggling with the handle. The warmth inside hit me like a wave. I checked her quickly, calling her name. She stirred, mumbling something incoherent, her skin pale but warm enough to suggest she hadn't been out long. Shock, blood loss, exhaustion, I couldn't say. But she was breathing, and that was enough for now. I grabbed the mobile again, though I didn't hold out much hope. But this time, mercifully, a single bar of signal flickered to life. Maybe the weather had shifted. I didn't care. The emergency operator's voice was calm and professional. Help was on the way, they said. An hour later, the first flashing lights cut through the fog. An ambulance, followed closely by a police car. The snow was already starting to ease, the wind dropping as if the moor itself had grown bored of us. The responders didn't ask too many questions, not about what had happened anyway. Their focus was Mary. They bundled her into the ambulance and took her off to Middlesbrough, leaving me wrapped in a foil blanket, half delirious, doing my best to explain the cause of Mary's wound and the man who'd come stumbling out of the fog. I didn't mention the rest of it. Not then. I tried once, later. One of the officers took a statement, and when I reached the part about the man changing, the teeth, the fur, the voice, I saw the look in his eyes. After that, I kept the rest to myself. Mary was in hospital for a few days. The bite healed better than expected, though the cause, officially anyway, remains unknown. Wild animal, they said, probably a dog, but nobody asked why a wild dog would be standing upright in a snowstorm. After her discharge, something changed between us. It wasn't dramatic, not at first. Just a distance, a weight we both carried, but never spoke about. We tried for a while, but neither of us could forget what happened. We're not together anymore. Haven't been for some time. Funny thing is, I don't blame her. She always said I was stubborn, that I carried things around too long. She's probably right. Truth is, I could never quite adjust to her new personality. And I suppose she couldn't quite keep up with mine either. And that's your lot. I've said what I need to say. Some nights, when the wind's up and the world's gone quiet, I still hear it, out there somewhere. A single sharp bark carried on the breeze, like someone trying to remember how a dog sounds. It always sounds like it's laughing. If you enjoyed listening today, be sure to subscribe to the channel by hitting the red subscribe button below. After doing so, click the bell icon next to the subscribe button to receive new content notifications. If you'd like to support our work and receive exclusive perks, consider becoming a channel member by clicking the Join button below. To support us in other ways, see the video description for links to our Bandcamp and Patreon pages, our merch store over at Teespring, and further information relating to our releases on Audible, iTunes, and Spotify. And until next time,